Thank you. Okay, it is 4:30, and we're going to call this meeting of Dunn County's Judiciary and Law Committee to order. First item is second is the call of the roll. Supervisor Vandermeulen, Supervisor Jetson, Supervisor Gilbert, and Supervisor Wilsey are here. And next up is the approval of the minutes from the January 27th meeting, and we'll need a motion for that. Supervisor Vandermeulen moves. Second by Supervisor Jetson. Any changes to the minutes or additions? See none. All in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. All right. Next up, public comment. Do we have any public comment today? Thank you. Hi, Marcy. And we'll move on to the staff reports. Andrea is not with us today, the district attorney. Any questions you have, you could email to her. And so next up is Josie, child support.
Hello, a couple of things. You have my report, and I mentioned the 2024 cooperative agreement revenue transfers. So those are the agreements that I have with clerk of courts and corporation counsel to basically sort of be subcontractors for my office to help us do the work that we do. And it's, for those of you who were on this committee a year ago, I had mentioned that the state had clarified how clerk of court staff were to be tracking their time, and we were sort of unsure as to how that might impact our revenue, but we anticipated it would be less. So when we look at this, I think it, at least for me, it ended up being way better than I thought it was going to be. Katie's nodding her head agreeingly. The $5,500 that we brought in 2024, less than 2023, mostly had to do because our assistant corporation counsel was on a leave for a few months at the beginning of the year, and so there was less billable hours from corporation counsel's office. So I'm happy with that. And then since this report was issued, there's been a vacancy in my office, the program coordinator position. I have yet to meet with HR to talk about a recruitment, but that'll be coming. Currently, I'm working with neighboring counties, St. Croix County and Eau Claire County, to help with some backfill of that position until we can fill it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody have questions for Josie?
Not necessarily just for Josie, but you mentioned federal payments. I know we're not federal, but I'm wondering if you or any others appear to be impacted by federal cutbacks in payments or in personnel. Just curious to know.
Sure. So my office is a federal program, which is administered by the states, and the state contracts with the individual counties. So I would love to say I'm federally mandated to exist, and all the services that I provide are, required by Congress, but at least that's what I'm saying right now. We'll see what happens.
Things required by Congress are apparently no longer in existence, so it's kind of uncertain. Okay.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Supervisor Wilsey.
You mentioned the child tax credit misinformation. Do you know what was that? What was that?
I actually saw something about it on Facebook, but I think it was on the various social platforms. And I think I actually had seen it on a fact check that proved it to be false. And they were saying that it was on President Trump's, posts, and it got a lot of people in a tizzy. So the Child Support Agency does not take a position on which parent should be able to claim a child for tax credits. But the court, in the family court case, will make orders to that effect. Sometimes it's, they'll alternate even in odd years. Sometimes it's, one parent will take all the kids all the years. But it's really up to the parents and the IRS and the Department of Revenue to like work out all those details. If someone claimed in a year that violated the court order and the parent called my office and said, "What do I do?" I'd say you need to go to the clerk of courts and file a motion and, ask the court to find the person in contempt, or, I don't know what the remedy will be. But it's a court issue. It's not a child support agency issue. But so what this false information said was that whoever the paying parent is the only person who gets to claim the children, period. And a lot of the caregivers who thought otherwise got a little angst about that misinformation, but it is false. So if anybody hears anything about it, there has been no change to the law in that regard. Mhm.
Any other questions for Josie? All right, thank you. Next up is Emergency Management 911. Melissa, anything to add to your report?
The only thing I want to add, is to talk about, the property that I've talked about a few times before, down in the township of Springbrook that had some flooding a couple years ago in the spring, and they had some erosion on their riverbank that possibly could impact their residents at some point, not right now, but at some point. And that we've been working with them for a couple years and also working with the state, and we finally have approval to move forward to apply for a grant on the property owner's behalf. So this really wouldn't be anything that Dunn County would, we wouldn't be receiving any of the money. We're just applying for the grant on their behalf because it has to be a local government agency that applies for this grant. It would be a state-funded project. The homeowner would be basically on the hook for the match portion of the grant. So this is fairly substantial. I want to say that their match portion is, 60-some thousand dollars or something like that, so they're going to have a vested interest in this grant. But we are applying for that. We have not completed it yet, but we're going to apply for that. We don't know if we'll actually be awarded the grant for them, but I just kind of want to keep you in the loop as this process goes, because we've been talking about it now for a couple years, and it's been a slow process. But yeah, they said that this was a project that they would deem would fit the qualifications for this grant. So we are going to go ahead and do that for this property owner. And, hopefully we'll be successful. I think we were the first county in the state to ever do one of these back in 2014. We were successful, and those people, finished their project, and actually it's the next door neighbor to this person now. So hopefully we will be successful. Just want to keep in the loop. There's nothing happening right today, but at some point, hopefully I'll be able to come to you and say we were awarded this grant, and just on behalf of Dunn County, it'll just be a pass-through type situation. So that's really all I wanted to add.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Supervisor Vandermeulen.
You decide cases like that, whether to say we need to help you or you shouldn't have built there.
Yeah, so we basically just kind of rely on guidance from, the mitigation office at the state level. We kind of take really all the local information that we have and hand that off to the state, and, they have engineers take a look at it and kind of assess the situation. I don't want to get too deep into the situation, but there's theories on how this property started to erode. And one of them is the project we did 10, 12 years ago changed a little bit of the river flow that may have, offered a little bit more erosion. There was a situation a couple springs ago where upstream, they opened a dam on Easter weekend and caused the river to come up a little bit faster than would have been in a normal spring or a normal rainfall, which then caused more water to kind of rush down through in a matter of a couple days versus over a couple, 3 weeks. There's all kinds of theories as to what caused it. So is it the fact that they just built in a bad place? Could be. Are these couple other situations factors that help make the place they built a little bit more unsteady than it would have been otherwise? Possibly. I'm not 100% sure. Everybody has their own theory, but basically we just rely on the state and the mitigation office to help us with those types of situations. And it's all in what they have going and what money they have eligible for projects like this. I think the one that we did in 2014, I mean, that they were sitting in a situation looking for funding for 3 or 4 years. Just they were at their wits' end, like we need help. But the state wasn't looking at it, their funding wasn't there. So, we may agree that we'd like to help them, but unless the state can, kind of jump in and help us, it doesn't always happen. It doesn't always happen. And there is another property right down in the same area, not the next door neighbor, but I can't remember the exact situation, but their property, I think it was like completely flooded. And so part of their property is like gone, like it kind of washed down. And it was just, I don't want to say just property, but there wasn't a home on it, and they're looking for some funding too. And we're like, we just don't know that you're going to qualify because it's not a residence and you're not impacted that way. So a lot of it is state driven.
My son has worked in planning, written among other things, hazard mitigation plans.
Sure.
And he likes to make posters, satirical posters, and one of his was "The river runs, but the banks remain the same," which of course they don't,
Right.
because the river runs. So, trout stream I fished growing up as a kid, revisited it 20 years later, the same stretch of stream, and it wasn't the same at all.
Right.
All my old favorite trout holes, or almost all of them, were gone, and there were new ones, but some of these things we just need to take a longer perspective on, I think.
Yeah, it is. It's just, and it's things that we can't control. I think I brought it up in last month's meeting about the all hazard mitigation plan that we're going to be working on. And I'm asking this committee to kind of be the steering committee for that plan. And that's exactly what it is. It's just severe weather can impact something, one extra wet spring or one really heavy rain. I have property that butts up to the Hay River, and Hay River is very sandy. And I've only lived there, 10, 12 years, and there's part of our bank that has washed away, but it does not impact my home whatsoever. But it definitely has, washed down. It is what it is. And so there are a lot of changes, but I think this, because it does impact a home, we're talking about a residence and sewer systems and all of those things. So the state probably looks at that a little bit different. But I know it's unique that they do this. And we're thankful for the help, because we like to help our residents. But yeah, it does get to that point. It's kind of like, building on the ocean front. And then when your house falls in, you want, $3 million to rebuild it. But each situation is looked at individually. Yes, right, right. Yeah, it is. It's one of those things is, like you said, they have a couple theories about how it may have changed and who knows if that was really the impact or not. Yeah. So,
Thank you.
yep.
Any other questions for Melissa before we move on? All right. Next up is the medical examiner. Marcy, anything to add to your report or to highlight?
I'm sorry. I do not have anything to add this evening, but I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the medical examiner? No? All right. We will move on to the sheriff. I see that Sheriff Bigg is not here tonight, but you all have his report in your packet, and Marshall is here. If there's anything you'd like to highlight or add since then? Supervisor Vandermeulen.
Curious with the push for deporting illegal immigrants, whether that has any impact on your office or the jail or anything like that?
We haven't received any information requests regarding that. Actually, I have FBI agent role player stopping last week and asked us. I said, we haven't heard anything in either case.
Okay.
Nothing's been asked of us. We haven't given any information regarding anything, so.
Mhm.
We're unaware of anything planned. Sometimes we're not told.
Okay. I was just curious what the situation was. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? Nope. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Next up is the clerk of courts. Katie, anything to highlight in your report or anything you wanted to add?
Nope, I don't have anything else additional to add unless there's any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Nope. All right. Thank you.
Perfect.
And Sarah is not here with the Criminal Justice Collaboration Committee, but got a thorough report in here, and you can reach out via email with any questions. And that brings us to items number 6, items placed at the request of the chair. 6A, discussion regarding geothermal and solar updates to the Judicial Center. Katie, do you want to give a little background of this, please?
Yes, so I was asked by Chris Corpola and Dan Dunbar to put this on the agenda as the Dunn County Judicial Center is going to get upgraded or potentially to geothermal and solar. We have Jason Stinney online who's going to do a short presentation, I believe. Jason, is that correct?
Thank you, first of all, for having us
We're
here.
unable to hear you right now, Jason.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Nope, still not able to.
Oh. Okay. Okay, can you hear me now?
I'm not, let me see.
Okay.
Jason, do you want to try again?
Sure. Can you
Okay,
hear me
there we
now?
go. Sorry about that.
Awesome. All right. Well, first of all, thanks for having us here. Not a tremendous amount to share this evening, but wanted to absolutely give a point of contact as we work through our process here. So on February 11th, we came into the county building for what we would clarify or quantify as a kickoff meeting, and that's essentially just the start of our development on site. I have Rory Stegman with me here today. He's the lead engineer for the project. Because as mentioned, this will affect the facility. We want to make sure that if questions are raised, that you have someone that you can reach out to. Over the next 4 weeks, we're going to be on site at various times with our engineering team and also various contractors, essentially building out the project and putting together our scope. And as we move forward, we essentially want to make sure that there's an awareness that as we are coming on site and as activities that may impact certain areas are taking place, that we will be communicating that well in advance. So there isn't surprise visits or drop-ins that are disruptive that weren't anticipated. So and Rory may be able to speak a little more to that than I, as it relates to the operational components.
Yeah, on the operational components, the biggest challenge is going to be probably the courtroom scheduling. At some point, we're going to have to take the courtrooms offline, preferably one at a time, but we're going to have to coordinate that scheduling very closely with the county. And I'm sure there'll be some other offices and different items that, you know, when we're working in that area, obviously we're not going to be able to have anybody in there. So we're going to have to be very thorough in developing our initial schedule and then develop it with county personnel to minimize any and all disruption.
I would note we're very well accustomed of working in these type of facilities, so understand the potential impact that our work can have, and obviously want to do everything in our power to mitigate the disruption that we cause. So. But as I mentioned, the next 4 weeks we will be in the development process, and then there will be a lag time as we work through the contracting portion with the county, moving into most likely early to midsummer before we are working in earnest on the project. So.
Well, thank you for your time. Are you, Jason, in direct contact with Katie, or who are you contacted with in the county?
Yeah, so Dan Dunbar's been my immediate point of contact through thus far through our development process. So, but I have Katie's information, and she's more than welcome to reach out to me if that's the most conducive way of communicating.
We shared contact information, so the biggest thing is going to be coordinating when they have to put in the new system. And obviously once, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, but once you do the cutover, there will be a portion where air conditioning won't be working at the Judicial Center for a period of time. We don't quite have a timeline on that yet, possibly.
Yeah, so areas that are would require to maintain air conditioning, we would find an external source to do that. So that will definitely be part of the scope discussion as we move forward. We're not going to leave areas that are going to be continually worked in 85-degree indoor temperature. So yeah, that potentially could be an impact, and that's something we will make sure to address.
Yeah, it's going to be the entire Judicial Center. So this just won't affect the courts. It's going to be the entire Dunn County Judicial Center. So every department in that building will be affected. Yeah, I think.
I have a question. I'm a department head for one of the agencies within the Judicial Center. So when you say we're going to need access, exactly who and for how long and for what purpose? Like, where are you going to be?
Generally, our access that we'll need will be in the majority of the building where the existing VAV boxes are. A big portion of the work will be done in the hallways and the existing mechanical rooms. But there may be instances we'll be need to be in a ceiling grid to put a unit in. And that will usually that takes a day to 2 days. And that's why when we develop our schedule, we have to work with you, because we have to all understand what it takes. I mean, if we have to do, let's say, the county clerk's office or the county collector's office. If we have to do that in the evening, then we'll have to do that in the evening. We've just got to figure out, what works with your schedule and put our construction schedule together based on that. It's not our first time doing a large government center or a jail. That's the good thing. We've done a fair number of these, and we haven't had any issues yet. In a perfect world, we just move you out of the building for about 3 months and then move you back in. But that is just flat not practical, as I'm sure you all understand.
Sure. So when you say you want to minimize disruption, is it just noise? Is like, what are those of us who are working, in the area that you're going to be, like, what are the impacts potentially that we're going to experience?
There may be some noise in the hallways. That should be easily mitigated. Closing doors, things like that. And if we have to use any loud equipment or grinding, we can find some designated safe spots at an appropriate distance away, not to disrupt the work that's done. When we are in an office, usually what we'll end it to change something out or do something like that. Usually we'll end up pulling out a 10 foot by 10 foot section of the ceiling grid. And then there'd be usually a team of 3 guys putting a unit in. But noise wise, there shouldn't be, we're not going to be welding or doing anything like that in the building.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for our guests? No, appreciate you being here, and
Thank you for the
wish
opportunity.
you well.
Appreciate it. Thank you. We'll be in touch. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, up next is item number 7, actions taken. There are none. Katie?
You missed 6B, the
I didn't.
presentation, sorry, by EMS.
Oh, I must be looking at an older
We
one
had
or
to
something.
amend the agenda
Oh,
to
okay.
add this on. Sorry about that.
That's okay. 6B is a presentation about the EMS.
Yes.
Okay.
And I believe they're both here in person. Is that correct? Yeah. Perfect.
Tony came prepared.
Thanks, sir.
Right, y'all. Get started. My name is Garrett Zastapel. I don't know if I've met most of you all. I'm the Community and Leadership Development Educator with UW Extension. I serve Chippewa, Dunn, and Eau Claire counties. I started here in Dunn, or in my role in May, so I'm relatively new to both the region and this work. So I'm here today with Tony Christopherson. Tony, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself.
I'm the chairman from the town of Elk Mound on the east side of the county.
And we were asked / kind of self-nominated to come present with you all today to really share some of the conversation and work that we've been doing around emergency medical services and fire in Dunn County. and give you kind of a lay of the land of some of the conversations that are happening that might have impacts for you all, your constituents, and the municipalities that you work with. I guess to start us off, the kind of big thing is that Tony found out today that he, or the town of Elk Mountain, not Tony, is the recipient of a $50,000 Wisconsin Innovation Planning Grant to advance the conversation. We're being able to hire some external support around fire and EMS in the county. So
There's been a group of us that worked, Chris Corpola, Dan Bunbar helped with that. The fire chief,
yep,
Jenny Class was there.
and then Cheryl and
Bob Cook from the town of Red Cedar. They're also on the WTA county unit.
so our goal for today is to really give you all kind of a lay of the land of what's going on, both at like the statewide level, so why this is an issue, and then to really illustrate what's going on here in Dunn County. So just so you all have a sense of the dynamics at play. So here in Wisconsin, when we think about kind of emergency management services, we have our law enforcement, but then we have both fire and EMS. Here in Wisconsin, there's about 360 different ambulance providing services that respond to over 1 million calls annually. So that's averaging out to about 2,700 calls a day. So these are folks that are busy, especially as we have an aging population in our state, where there's more calls for lift requests and other medical events. We have fewer fire calls, but more fire departments. So that's about 800 fire departments. Importantly, though, our folks that work for fire are often cross-licensed as both fire and either paramedic or EMT or EMR, and they're doing about 30,000 EMS calls annually here in the state of Wisconsin. So lots of things that are going on. Importantly, when it comes to state statute, so this is where we start getting into the rub a little bit. For our Wisconsin towns, per state statute, our townships are required to offer both ambulance and fire services. When it comes to our villages and cities, for ambulance, we have some mays. So a village or city may provide ambulance service. And for our villages, fire is required. So there's some interesting perspectives when it comes to the kind of statutory regulations around it. Notably, in the last few years, so this has been standardized. State statute has gone on to define what it means to provide an ambulance service as being able to document 24/7, 365 service for ambulances in your township. So when you have to certify with the state of Wisconsin that you were providing ambulance service, you are saying that you are able to do this. And then in the last kind of big legislative session, so 2023, the legislature passed Act 12, which basically requires an ongoing notice to the state government that says, yep, we are providing all of these services at a level that we have historically been. And then there is a notification process if for some reason, let's say you're EMS, you go from paramedic level to advanced EMT, right? But there is this kind of additional regulation that's happening from the state. Here in Dunn County, just so you all are kind of aware of the dynamics that we have 2 primarily career fire departments that serve Dunn County. So that's the Menominee Fire Department and then the portion of our county that's served by Eau Claire Fire. We have 17 primarily volunteer ambulance or 7 volunteer ambulance departments. And then we have 1 emergency medical responder group. And there's a big asterisk by them. EMRs are a unique part in our emergency medical response service. They are not allowed to serve a patient inside of an ambulance. They're allowed to serve that patient on the scene and then drive an ambulance. So if you are short-staffed, they can be that critical element in the event that you need a driver or to provide that life-saving care when someone is in crisis. So this is especially important in our rural portions where it might take a little bit longer to get an ambulance on site, but those EMRs can be there on the scene. And then just so you all are aware, that's kind of the breakdown of training that we have for the different levels of licensure when it comes to emergency medical services. So we can see how progressively it becomes more. And then that ongoing biennial training also increases. And the state legislature has also been increasing that, which has created some additional burdens for our folks. For fire, we have one career volunteer fire department here in Dunn County, and then we have 11 primarily volunteer. And that's their licensure according to the state. I'm throwing a lot of information at you all. I promise we'll have time for questions, and you all have these slides in front of you. So the key questions that are emerging around both fire and EMS is whether or not they are reliable and sustainable. So when we think about reliability, that means, are we able to show that we can respond to our first due call? So we are providing an ambulance service 24/7, 365. And then can we do that every single day? And what we're finding, and this is harsh language, but this is what's coming out of the Office of Rural Health, is that we're seeing a lot of services are not reliable, nor are they sustainable. So we use the language of failed and failing, and often this is not often. This is never the fault of the folks who are responding to our calls, right? These are folks that are doing their best. They're trying to do as much as they can with very limited resources. And the system has failed. The way that we've thought about how we deliver these services has started to fall apart because we're seeing aging demographics, lower volunteer numbers. And so it's putting a lurch for our rural communities, especially in our local governments. Here in Wisconsin, so this was a report that came out in 2023 that surveyed a majority of our EMS services in the state. Our portion of the state has a 64% reliability deficit. So 64% of all EMS agencies in the northwest portion of Wisconsin are not able to document that 365 24/7 coverage. Statewide, it's 41%, and we know that this is especially challenging for our rural and primarily volunteer services. And there's a lot of different factors that are going into this. So it gets into staffing. So it's difficult to recruit volunteers. It's difficult to keep paid staff, especially when we're close to the cities that can poach our folks and promise better wages. Operating expenses have gone through the roof. We're looking at 2 to 3 times greater than the consumer price index increases for equipment to provide our services. The money coming in when folks are delivering services, that Medicare, Medicaid reimbursement is not keeping up to the actual cost to do a run. We have difficulty getting folks trained. And then our capital expenses. I've heard of counties that are waiting 2 to 3 years to get a new ambulance. So there's a lot of moving parts to this that's making it really difficult for services to respond to calls when they come in. Tony, I think I can do this one and then,
Yep.
Yeah. So just to give you all a sense of kind of what's going on money-wise. So keeping in mind that kind of training requirement, on the left-hand side, you see kind of what the rates are for both professional and volunteer. And this varies from agency to agency. And sometimes you get an hourly wage when you're on call, and it might be $7 an hour. Other times you might have a more substantial wage. It's dependent upon the agency. But for our paramedics, statewide, the average is about $29 an hour. And what we're finding is that a lot of hospitals are starting to recruit folks in to go and pursue RN programs for paramedics. And they kind of promise, more stable hours, less intense work. And so there's competition for the labor there. And then when it comes to the capital expenditures for fire and EMS, a new ambulance, you're looking at about $250,000 in a 2 to 3 year waiting period. For a new fire, so a new pumper that services a rural fire district, you're looking at about $850,000. And even just a new power cot, so what you would need to move someone on a cot out of the house and into an ambulance, is $20,000. I'm sure you all have heard from the municipalities that you represent. Most of them would rather find other things to spend $22,000 on when it comes to the really kind of financial crunch that our municipalities are in. So it's difficult for our counties or for our communities to really provide this service given the really high costs that go into it. Tony, now you're up.
So part of my responsibility as being on the town chairman is also to be on the fire board for the Elkbound District Fire District. And our fire engine is 23 years old right now, and we went through and did $100,000 of repairs on that. That will hopefully keep it running for another 10 years or so, so we can avoid that $500 to $800,000 cost. So, I did some looking here. A lot of you are aware that the state passed a levy limit law in 2005 that does not allow municipalities, including the counties, to raise your property taxes without either a referendum or in vote from the people or a net new construction. So I was looking in the town of Elk Mound contracts with the Colfax ambulance, oh, I can't say nothing, service, okay? There's several as opposed to on the map in there, you have the Boyceville ambulance, which is a district. That means each municipality owns in on the district. But anyway, so we're paying in on a per capita basis. And in 2006, our total cost was $10,000. That has risen to 2024, we paid in $78,000. And for 2025, we'll pay in $90,000. Our fire operating cost has not gone up as much, primarily because it doesn't use as much labor. And we've been lucky, our chief has been able to come up with enough grants to fund a bunch of major equipment costs. So our cost in 2006 was $34,000. In 2024, we were at $40,000, and we're about the same now. For both 2024 and 2025, the state law says that as long as we do not raise the cost of operating the fire department more than the consumer price index plus 2%, and that all the municipalities pass the same resolution approving that, then any municipality that chooses may increase their levy by the required amount. And so the town of Elk Mound has done that the last 2 years, but it's an $800 increase has been what our increase has been on our levy. So look at the bottom, we've gotten, in the county got some last year also, the general municipal aid, we got an increase in that. And the state says, well, this is going to help you, state says this, we realize your costs are going up and this is going to fix your problem. So we have a $68,000 increase, and we get the $61,000 increase in the general municipal aid. We subtract off the $68,000 for their increase in ambulance, and we subtract off the $6,000 for the increase in the fire operating. We're still $12,000 in the hole. And then we raised the cost of our ambulance another $12,000 for 2025. To your buttons for your next slide. So before I get into this one here, what's going on is the only line item in the local municipal budget that we can take funds out of is road repairs. And so the road that I live on was graded and paved in 1966. I actually did manage to find the contract that was signed. I think my grandfather was clerk at that time, signed with the county for them to do that work. Okay. Then it was repaved in 1989. So the culverts out there are a year older than I am. They have not been changed. It'll be another 20 years before there's enough money in our budget to pave that road. We went through a couple of years ago, and I got a spreadsheet that long. Every road, what it needs, how much it's going to cost. And that 20-year target is assuming there's no inflation to drive up the cost of fixing the road, and also assuming that we are able to continue to put the same amount of funds in every year. I think both of those are bad assumptions. So when we're looking at the cost, unfortunately, getting some of the numbers out, I wasn't able to get from every single year. But if we look at the Colfax EMS, the total budget for 2025 is $784,000. Their total labor cost is $458,000. And I think I switched it around. I think it's 548,000. But anyway, in 2015, they were paying $3.50 an hour for people to be on call. Plus they had a stipend for the call. In 2016, they'd gone to the casual employees that they had, they were paying $7.25 an hour. Then in 2022, they increased that, or we have the numbers there. They had $21.60 for full-time. The part-time was $12.62. The casual employees at $7.50. They were having trouble hiring people at $7.50 an hour to come and sit in the ambulance bay. Everybody can understand what was going on there. So then they raised those numbers in 2023. I found the numbers, the part-time then was at $13.50 and the casual at $10 an hour. For 2025, their budget, their average hourly base pay, not including workman's comp and all them other costs, it's $26.18 an hour. So if you look at what their budget is, it's not that the majority part of their budget is wages, and they're not overpaying the people. Okay. Most of these people that are working there, if they went to McDonald's or Quick Trip, they would get a raise. Spacebar. So this was, I presented a bunch of this information last year on some comparisons. We got the fire operations, the mill rates for each fire department. And there's some comparison. Our per capita on an ambulance last year for the town of Elk Mound was $40. That was into the Colfax EMS. Boyceville, those numbers range from, for 2023, I believe those numbers range from $65 per capita up to over $100 per capita. It's what they were paying in there. Some of the surrounding areas, Chippewa Falls was charging $34 per capita. I think Chippewa Rural Fire District was in this similar cost. One of the things we've looked at is how much we bill out to people who are providing services to. So fire costs, you have your standby or your fixed cost. That gives us a station with the heat, has trucks with fuel, water, and equipment. Then when we make a fire call, how much of that, how much is it costing us to replenish what's going on? Okay. A year ago, we'd had a fire and we had paid out $2,500 to get the excavator in to tear the building apart to put the fire out. When you call the guy and it's 10 below zero and you expect him to bring his excavator in, obviously there's expenses and they expect to be paid. So we pay them. It used to be that the bill was sent to the landowner and then we had trouble with them getting paid. You don't want them people upset. At that particular fire, we had $1,600 in repairs on the truck. It was cold, things broke. We're also looking at a training I participated in, and they were talking about propane, liquefied petroleum gas. They were talking about they had a train car load of propane that had tipped over. They had to have 2 firemen there for 21 days, 24 hours a day to monitor that until it cooled down and they could close that valve off. So at a reasonable price at $20 per hour, they ended up with $20,000 into that cost. So we're working on our situation, talking with Altoona Fire Department. They had it wasn't this expensive, but they were turned in a bill to somebody that had a call in the highway, and the insurance company said, sure, we'll pay the bill. You show us your ordinance that says you're allowed to do that. Well, not all the I's were dotted and the T's weren't crossed on their ordinance, and so they weren't able to do that. So we're in the process of updating it because we have 3 municipalities. All those ordinances have to be the same.
So as we look at trying to figure out how, like, what are some of the levers that we have to try and both rein in costs as well as make sure that we can provide these essential services for our community. So the last thing we want to do is be wondering, will someone come when I call 911? The loophole, not loopholes, but the where there's wiggle room within state statute. So one, for our townships, there is a carve out as it relates to fire protection that can be added to property owners' or tax statements as a fee. So rather than a property tax, it's a fee like we would pay for recycling or trash that can go under as fire. So that falls outside of that levy limit. So that is an option that exists for townships as it relates to fire. For ambulance, we are not allowed to tax outside of the levy limit at the municipal level for ambulance service. The only carve out in state statute is at the county level, which is kind of bizarre. Right now, there's rumors at the Capitol that there's going to be some additional leeway to this, other options to exceed the levy limit for ambulance. Yeah, it's confusing. But these are kind of the two things that are available right now to think about additional ways of raising funds to address this problem, along with the ways that we're currently funding this, which is often through donations and charitable giving, seeking grants. But as far as it falls onto municipal and county governments to make sure that these essential services are available. When it comes to EMS, as far as reimagining models, so the conversation I'm part of this, I've been part of EMS conversations in both Eau Claire County and Chippewa County, as well as with some other folks statewide that are thinking about this. When it comes to what are some additional solutions given the tools that we have right now. So the first is to do nothing, right? We always have to name that as an option, which is to just let things be how they are, and until there's a real problem, we'll just let it be. When it comes to that kind of levy carve out for EMS, there's kind of three different models that have emerged. So one is there are some counties here in Wisconsin that own and operate their own ambulance services. Those are primarily our very rural counties, Florence, Vilas, Sawyer, Rusk. And there are pros and cons to both of those, but that's an option. The other option is that the county contracts for ambulance services, either with one provider or with multiple providers. And that's a model that's taking off more in other places in the state. So right now, Lafayette, I think that's their kind of key recommendation. There was just a study that came out of there. Racine is pursuing that as a model. And just to give you a sense of what this looks like. So there's 8 counties that operate with a county or that have a county operated model, which is where the county does everything. They run the ambulances, they're staffing, they're responsible for the capital expenditures, and then they're doing that billing with insurance companies. This has been a less popular model in probably the last 5 years because it's really onerous for our county governments to have to do all of this. Especially when it's not statutorily required. What we're seeing instead is this model where counties are contracting with 1+ service providers to deliver these services. And these can be both private providers, so Aspirus in Lincoln County is one of their contractors, or it's pre-existing municipal providers. Who really tackle all of that. And then there's different ways that the billing happens, but this is just really to give you all a sense of this is the conversation that's happening across the state. Tony and I are not here to be like, we must pursue countywide levy for ambulance services, but just to let you all know that this is a conversation that's happening with the Towns Association, with the Counties Association, and that's happening here in Dunn County. Not necessarily we must pursue this, but what can we do to strengthen our EMS and fire services? And then the last kind of innovative model that we're seeing emerge is this notion of a community paramedic. So one of the things that we're seeing, especially in our older parts of the county or our older parts of Wisconsin, so that is places with older populations, is that a lot of the calls that they're getting aren't necessarily medical emergencies. It's grandma's fallen, or I have a headache, or this part of my body hurts, what do I do? And so what we're finding is this community paramedic model where it's essentially folks that are on call to respond for an ambulance, but often that's not needed all the time. And so they're doing almost public health nursing. So it's a public health emergency medical approach where they're making appointments to go see grandma to help her with her whatever pain that's going on. As a way to both be there when that emergency happens and also do some of that preventative work on the front end to help actually lower the calls that are coming into 911 so that we can have greater or have a greater response when there's that medical emergency that comes up. So we've talked a lot at you all. What questions do you have for us?
Curious with the paramedic approach, how do you, who decides how a call gets served with the paramedic visit or an ambulance?
So with the community paramedic model, my understanding, and this is not my area of expertise, is that essentially your community paramedic would have appointments, right? With the understanding that if there is that medical emergency, so our paramedics are often kind of the backup. So if I'm going to pick on Colfax, right? So if Colfax can't staff a rig, right? Or they have an ambulance out, that first due is out, they're following their state statute, and a second call comes in, and they don't have two people to go respond to that call. That community paramedic can meet the one person who's at the call or who can respond to the call and provide that service there. Or they can meet an EMR who can drive an ambulance while that community paramedic serves the patient in the back of the ambulance. So it's a more flexible model that way.
The other thing, if you get time, look up Bayfield County, and they have done a study. It's the same company that's, are entering into the contract with through the study for Dunn County. One of the things they were talking about having some countywide paramedics. One of the things I hear is that Boyceville Ambulance and Colfax are basic life support. Okay. Menominee is paramedic level. So if we have a heart attack, there are, Melissa would correct me if I'm wrong, but there's drugs that paramedics can give on the ambulance that basic life support can't. So a lot of times then they're getting what they call an intercept. Obviously in Elk Mound, a lot of times they're going to be headed to Eau Claire to a bigger hospital. All right. So they will get an ambulance from Eau Claire to come out with the paramedic that has the drugs and then can give the drugs on that. So their Bayfield study, the idea is to have these county hired paramedics that are stationed in the county, a couple of them available each shift. And then they're available to consult with grandma on appointments and all this sort of stuff. When they're not, if they're not needed on an ambulance call, then that's what they're doing. When they are needed, then they can meet the ambulance and help, either as backup or as the paramedic intercept is one of their ideas. Another thing that there was discussion about this at the Towns Association meeting in January, and Melissa had brought up afterwards that we have some much smaller ambulance providers in the northern part of the county. The municipalities are paying much less per capita. I can show you the numbers. One of them is paying $4 per capita. But then she says, but there's an asterisk. And we get paged. So they get the call, they page. Nobody comes for 4 minutes. Nobody responds. They repage the second time. No one responds. Then it's 8 minutes. Then they go down the list to the next place before they get somebody in there. Okay. That's a concern to me above and beyond the whole finance deal is are we really providing all the way across the county? Are we providing a similar service? I realize that when you move out in the country, there's trade-offs. Okay. One of them is some of those emergency medical services are are a longer response time. Okay? There's a less risk of crime in the country. Okay, you trade that off. Any other questions?
So are you presenting, I guess the point you were making about ways to raise funds, loophole or what have you, as you put it, to offer more services? Or, I mean, and EMS is tougher to discuss. I know with fire protection, especially with volunteers, you have a lot of equipment and training and such. But in the end, the shortcoming is it's volunteer. The response time is about them getting to the department, not because they're obviously not there. So there's a lot of money spent, but very few homes saved. They save the neighbors though, but very rarely is it fast enough to just the nature of volunteer. I mean, couldn't like compress a couple volunteers into something where you actually had a stationed, I mean, I'm just talking about the money spent versus service provided.
That's a question. And so, the contractor that's gonna look at, we're gonna do a study, we're gonna look at EMS countywide. And he was proposing $35,000 to do that and 52,000, so 50% more to also look at countywide fire. So we said, we're gonna go for it. We're gonna study, see what we have and, where our strengths and weaknesses are in the county and go forward. The, principal operator of that company is a paramedic, is a firefighter. Okay, and then he went in, I think he was also a fire chief before he went out into the consulting world. So he understands what it takes to ride the ambulance and do all that sort of stuff. So we're gonna do some looking at that. One of the challenges is that town of Elk Mound had a structure fire about 3 weeks ago. Probably everybody's seen it on the news, shooters burnt to the ground. Lots of questions if, whether they had a new batch of hot chicks that week or what happened. But anyway, the, that situation there, it was called for the call went in at 5 o'clock. Then it was called for mutual aid. Menominee Fire come out with their ladder truck to put the water on top. But the truck brings 1,000 gallons of water. They used 130,000 gallons. So now you got to start hauling it. Melissa's crew called me at 5:30 and said, we need sand. Okay, it's getting icy. My fire department calls me about 5 minutes later and said, can you please head to your irrigation well and start loading fire trucks? I got there at 6 o'clock. I loaded for an hour and 45 minutes. I pumped 100,000 gallons of water. The other 30,000 gallons that they use that day come out of the reservoir at the village. But the village has only got a 78,000 gallon reservoir. So it's got to come from someplace else. Had that fire been, same building, had it been in the city of Menominee on a hydrant, it wouldn't have taken the 10 tenders to haul all that water in there. Okay. And the city doesn't have enough staff available that they can pull in to haul that water. That's one of the beauties of the volunteer is and mutual aid is you bring in all these fire departments, everybody brings in a truck with 2 guys in to help haul all that water in. That's, some of the pros and cons.
Right. I just know even within the village, it's the time waiting because we had a fire in the village. And you have a fire department that you can literally throw a rock and hit.
Yes.
But there's still 20 minutes to,
Yeah,
so
to wait for everybody to get
proximity
there.
to the fire station in Elk
Yeah.
Mound don't mean nothing. I think it lowers your insurance, but it probably shouldn't.
Yeah, but then you have the trade-off. If you wait for, it took 20 minutes for the firefighters to get there to man the truck.
Yeah.
Okay, if we would have called for the city of Menominee to come out, it was gonna take 17 minutes for them guys to drive out with the truck. So sometimes it's a horse apiece on a response
Right,
time.
right. Yeah.
Any other questions? All right.
Otherwise, I'll close with this. On Saturday, I watched a movie named The Best of Us, primarily filmed in Cornell, Wisconsin, that portrays how a rural Wisconsin community deals with death, family, and generational transitions told through the eyes of the volunteer fire department. It reminds me of this, and I quote, 7 nights after Sarah's death, the entire department met at the fire hall. A team of 5 volunteers, EMTs and firefighters, led by a minister, took us through the critical incident stress debriefing. The experts will tell you CISD is an integrated system of interventions designed to mitigate the adverse psychological reactions that accompany an event with the potential to overwhelm the coping skills of an individual or a group. What you basically do is get together and talk the whole thing over with outside supervision and support. It has been 6 years since our last CISD. We had that one after Tracy Rhymes was killed on Jabowski's Corner. I'm not one for group therapy, but I saw some powerful good done in the session we held for Tracy, and now I am 4 square behind the idea. We sat in a circle, and the minister got us started, and that's all I'll say. CISD is only effective if everyone speaks freely without fear of chatter. The first thing the group leader does after closing the door is bind everyone in the room to complete confidentiality. The doors were closed for 2 hours. When we came out, someone had a pot of coffee ready, and we leaned around on the trucks, smoking and dunking cookies. And we made the sort of small talk you make when you're finding your way back to the trail. End quote. So writes Michael Perry in his book Population 485. So named because he is from New Auburn, Wisconsin, whose population is 485. A registered nurse by training, Perry has been an active EMT since 1988 and a volunteer firefighter since 1995. This CISD was in response to the death of Sarah, Michael's sister-in-law. The call was responded to by his mother and his brother, Sarah's husband of 7 months. There are some memories that will stay with you forever. At a fire board meeting last year, Terry, one of the other members, and I reminisced about when there was a gunman on campus at the Elk Mound school system some 40 years ago. My classmate was taken out of class to a safe place, while Terry, in his role as police chief at that time, was outside dealing with my classmate's gun-wielding father. But the one that haunts me is the night more than 25 years ago when an employee said, "We need to talk. I almost committed suicide." Thankfully, both of these ended well. Needless to say, Melissa Gillenbach's comment after the Towns Association meeting about paging for an ambulance and not getting a response for 4 minutes, then paging again and waiting 4 more minutes, then finally going down the list to the next provider to be able to get a response bothers me. The 8-minute delay for an ambulance may not affect you as a committee personally until the additional stress this puts on our 911 call center telecommunicators cause them to move on to something less stressful, thereby creating another vacancy that is hard to fill in these times. They regularly call me from an unavailable number at all hours of the day or night to say things like, "There's a tree down across the road," or "The last request, as I told you about, was for salt sand. And then my fire department called me for water." The telecommunicators don't need more stress. The information we have is pointing to an unsustainable future, and I will not stand by and do nothing. Thank you.
Thank you both for the presentation. Carl, do you have the agenda in front of you? Well, I unfortunately need to get home. It's not an emergency, but it's a pseudo one, not a big deal, but I gotta get moving. So if you could wrap it up, I'd appreciate it. Sorry, everybody.
I make the announcement.
So,
Eight. Consideration. of motions and ordinances. Emergency Communications 2024 carry forwards. Melissa?
Thank you. I just bunched a couple of my projects together and put them in the carry forward. A couple of them have been carried forward a few years now, but we were able to accomplish some things that I had been working on for a couple of years and did get them off our plate in 2024. But there is a few more that we're working on. So I do have them in the carry forward. If you have any questions, I can work, try and answer them. I did work with Beata on this, so, she went through it with me and everything is up to her standards, at least, in my request. So did you have any questions on what I have in my request for carry forward?
Anybody? Then I guess we,
I think we do need a motion to send it forward. I think then and Beata will wrap it up into the full resolution, which will then go to the full county board in March. So yeah, we probably just need a motion to carry it forward.
okay. And moved and seconded to what I guess approve the carry forward and advance it to the full full supervisor group. Any further discussion or comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Opposed? That motion carries. And the sheriff's office apparently has a carry forward.
So our carry forwards is the K-9 donation expense, which is basically the accumulation of money donated to the department that just keeps rolling over to support the ongoing K-9 program. Second is the first responders. Again, that's money attributed by the community to assist in that program. The final one is the patrol grants, middle to late of last year through the opioid settlement. Part of that settlement, a small portion was given, decided applicable to our departments was money to provide wellness visits for our department, the police department, and eventually here, the 911 center. What we're asking to carry forward is the portion of $15,000 that was not spent last year because of the time that it was received to be utilized now this year. And then the budget adjustment is also related to that. That is again, a portion provided to us to distribute for both our staff, Menominee Police Department and the Communications Center for a total of $16,700. The additional over the $15,000 that was given to us last year is the portion for the Communications Center.
Okay, so I guess we need a motion to approve the 2024 carry forwards and 2025 budget adjustment from the sheriff's department. Okay, and Luke seconds. So any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Okay, it's approved. Everybody available voted for it, so. Clerk of Courts resolution to support county courts.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to this. So this came from the Wisconsin Counties Association partnering with the Wisconsin Clerk of Courts Association. So you've heard me talk about the increased expenses for interpreters or court-appointed attorneys in Dunn County. So the Wisconsin Counties Association is making this their number one priority, asking the governor and legislature to pass increasing the circuit court funding for the county courts. So instead of them picking each county specifically in a certain amount, Wisconsin Counties Association is asking for $70 million increase for 2025 and 2026. I do know that the governor released his budget report last week and included, I think it was $24.5 million. We'll obviously see what takes place between now and July, but so the goal was that every county in Wisconsin just support a resolution through the county board urging that more funding be given to the circuit courts, specifically to help offset the costs that for the Dunn County or any county statewide, essentially, for increased court spending. So this is just a resolution. I did have the county manager, or I'm sorry, Jim McMenemy, the county corporation counsel, look at the paperwork. He was fine with it, but if this gets approved, it go before the March county board meeting. And then it will go down to the governor's office, just showing that all counties in the state of Wisconsin are in favor of this, if it's approved.
So a motion to support the resolution urging Governor Evers to support the county courts. Okay. Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Okay. Then I think I remember right. I'm trying to be in two places at once on my list here. I think it was announcements next, right? I have to announce that this will be John's last meeting with us. He is moved a little bit and we all represent a geographic area. So he has to resign and somebody else will be appointed. But I feel bad that he wasn't here to say goodbye. And I didn't know if he had to leave too quickly to stop him and thank him. But I've enjoyed working with him a great deal and I'm sure the rest of you have. So and Luke, should I make a further announcement? Oh, okay. Then I think I remember right. The next meeting is the 24th. Any other business or announcements? Okay, then the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
March. I thought it was my birthday. It was my birthday today. But I guess not. Maybe. In my head, I was thinking that was the, I guess it's. Well, I like my. Very exciting.